everybody. Welcome to another episode of Cleaning the Built World, hosted by myself, Nathan, a co-founder at Mero. With me here today is Harsha Vachher, CEO of Tech Labs. Harsha, welcome to our podcast, and thanks for your time. Harsha, if you don't mind, could you give everybody a quick introduction about yourselves and what you do?
Hello, Nathan. Thank you for having me. Hi, everyone. I'm a solution architect by trade, and with 15 plus years of hands-on knowledge in cybersecurity, IoT, and smart buildings, I help building owners and facility teams drive successful initiatives in operational technology and strategic growth.
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting field, and I think something that we really want to touch on, Harsha. Can you just tell me a little bit about how you got into this space? You know, what led you into the world of cybersecurity and the kind of things that you focus on your day to day? What were you doing for this current role that you're in now?
So after completing my master's, I started working in telecom, and that was a very short stint, close to 1 year. Then I moved to SafeNet Infotech, and now it's known as Gemalto. So from there, I got interested in cybersecurity. From SafeNet, I moved to HCL Technologies and I started working in their R&D division, working on IoT. So back then it was called machine to machine. So earlier I used to work in different domains, but started focusing more on smart building and smart city and focusing more on IoT devices, communication technologies, and security. That's where I got this interest. And then I started focusing on smart building and cybersecurity. And then eventually that led to Tech Labs, where we help building owners and property management company understand their risk and mitigate their risk in the.
Yeah, so it really seems like your career has been the sort of combination or colliding of worlds, really, between the say the technology world and the property management or real estate worlds. Can you talk a little bit about how you've seen that develop? Because obviously, coming from the IT background and having worked for some major telecom companies, tell me a little bit about how you grew that and saw that being a fit within real estate, because I think personally it's really interesting to me for me to see for real estate. I think we see it as an asset class that can often move very slow, and technology at times can move very fast. So talk to me a little bit about how you see that kind of colliding of world happening in your career and what really interested you about trying to bring those two together.
That's a very interesting question, Nathan. And you also coming from a technology background. Technology moves very fast. And when it comes to real estate, we have seen a lot of development, but very slow as compared to other industries. So having worked with different clients on the property management side before starting Tech Labs, I learned a lot about property management and, the building side, the actual domain side of. And now I was able to bridge that technology and cybersecurity gap in the industry. Understanding the domain has definitely helped the way the domain works and, being very mindful in incorporating and merging that technology and cybersecurity into that domain.
Mhm. So yes, really, I think in some of that, I think what would be interesting for some people listening is, kind of how does this apply in a real world sense? Now that we use iPhones or we use our tablets and computers everywhere, I think we can see how software has made such a big impact on our lives. But can you give me some real life examples of building owners and property managers that have used smart building technology in their own operations to better drive, kind of their day to day?
Sure. And before we start, as a disclaimer, I'm representing myself and views expressed are mine and do not reflect the views of the organization I work for or affiliated with. So definitely, like, as you can see, the possibilities of IoT and smart building technologies are endless. I mean, it doesn't matter what type of building you are talking about, be it office, retail, industrial space, the options are endless. And we have seen the buildings become better and smarter with the help of these IoT solutions. Just and one thing that I've seen, it's not changing the way building owners work. Even it has changed the relationship between landlord and tenant, especially as you mentioned, with the use of mobile app for tenants to control the devices. And at the same time, this gives owners and managers a dashboard to maintain and create operational efficiency and cost saving. But having said that, what we have seen is the primary backbone of all these technology solutions and these IoT-based application is data. We put devices and sensors in the building that collects data and generate insights. And we can, visualize usage and patterns and streamline the process. One thing that I'm very commonly seeing these days are smart, so in terms of smart solutions, is the space management solution. Especially during the pandemic time, we have seen how these space management solutions has picked up to know how many people come in your building, how many people are there in a space at any given time. So this has helped in better space management. The second thing that we are very commonly seeing these days is indoor air quality. With the use of IoT sensors, you analyze indoor air quality and actually determine whether there's a need to infuse fresh air in the building.
Yeah, so talk to me a little bit. I guess those technologies, particularly, I feel like, or maybe you do as well. That were very much born from the pandemic. So how has the pandemic affected the real estate industry, both positively and negatively? And really, I guess, what is your vision for the future of the real estate industry when it comes to marrying technology and the built world?
Pandemic has definitely changed the way real estate industry had been operating. We have seen an increase in use of technology like cameras, IoT sensors, and devices. Even, we used to have building automation system and some other systems being remotely accessed by vendors and employees. But during pandemic time, this has increased. With this connected world, we have seen an increase in cybersecurity attacks on buildings. With cameras and in a rush to put these sensors in the property, we have seen a shift of hackers from IT world to the OT.
Yeah, so that brings me really to our next point, and I think your area of expertise, is talking about cybersecurity and like you said, potential risks for kind of malware and these types of things for people to expose. What what can building managers do in order to protect themselves when adopting different IoT technologies?
Cybersecurity is a highly sensitive area that demands a trustworthy vendor. And there are several reasons, why these IoT devices are vulnerable to attack. And we have seen, in a rush to produce these connected devices and get them to market quickly, sometimes we miss or we lack that security and that exposes the devices and users to security. Second, there's a shortage of internal responsibility when it comes to IoT, privacy, and security in property management and building ownership. Like who owns that responsibility? Other factors like lack of authentication, and there's no proper path for security patch updates like we have in the IT. All these factors make these devices even more vulnerable. So before deploying new system or a technology, perform a security risk assessment. That includes assessment of the new system, vendor best practices. Assess the system based on design, what technology is being used in the system, and how the vendor has addressed the security concern around that technology,
Mhm.
how the system is deployed and used, security features in that system, also vendor best practices, because we often give the responsibility of managing the system to the vendor and the data is posted on the vendor platform. So it's really important to assess the vendor best practices, how they deploy, how they manage the devices, their processes and compliance, and wherever applicable, check for device and system certification.
What are some examples of vendor standards that are becoming popular? I think there are different compliances and certifications and things. Or what are some that you feel are the most relevant for vendors to be aware of?
It changes from solution to solution, but commonly for cloud-based application. We do ask for penetration testing, SOC to compliant. And then when it comes to IoT devices, what type of technologies they are using, have they mitigated the security risk in that technology while deploying these sensors, and what are the IT practices of that, the security practices of that vendor.
And I guess in talking about this, I think what would be really helpful for people listening would be kind of understanding some, I guess, real life examples. Do you have any, do you recall of any times or examples that you're able to share? Maybe even just that's out there in public of cybersecurity events that have been, kind of dramatic financial impacts or even reputational damages, whether in real estate or just in kind of the technology world in general.
Well, there are so many incidents I can talk about, and we can talk on this for hours. But I'll share a few incidents without diving into details about the real estate company and building. So a few years back, one fine morning, management person, he saw a message on a computer running the access control system. And this was in a residential building. At the same time, residents also started complaining about fog not working. The system was put on manual, and when we investigated, we saw that there was a message on the screen, and we got to know it's a ransomware attack. So on further investigating, like what led to this ransomware, it was found that the system was being used by the security person last night to browse internet, and that led to accidentally download the ransomware. So building was a manual operation for 2 days, and property management team, and that's the good side of it, property management team effectively handles the communication with the tenants. Otherwise, this could have significantly impacted the building reputation and tenant trust. Then I remember another incident, and this was shared at Realcom in 2019. So one of the person shared that they saw some malicious activity in the network. And when they were browsing the logs, they saw someone hacked into the building automation system. They didn't cause any harm. They were there on that system for a long time without being detected. And looked like their motive was not to impact the building operations, but they were actually looking for a path to the corporate net.
And, obviously, as major organizations, it seems that, these large corporations can really present, targets, I suppose, for attacks and for threats. What are some of the practices for some of these companies that you've seen to properly protect themselves and to defend themselves against some of these threats?
As you asked earlier, what has changed, and especially during the pandemic? So in the past, these building systems and network weren't considered high risk for cyber because they weren't connected to the internet. It was standalone site. Now with the use of IoT and cloud application, we have made building systems a primary target for cyber. There's a need for deploying IoT solutions, connecting it to internet, deploying cloud application. But at the same time, there's an increase in attack surface. Building net system networks are different than IT networks because they have applications that are critical to operations. Elevators, we have HVAC, we have access control, and they run on proprietary protocols. So, and these applications and protocols were not designed with security first. Some of the measures that we commonly use to protect these traditional building systems is just hide your building systems behind fire. These firewalls will not only hide the building systems from internet, but also provide additional security like malware. Keep the system and application up to date, patch regularly. And this is one of the things we commonly don't see in this building world. We patch our IT system regularly. We have up to date system and application. The same practice should be applied on the building system. And if for some reason we are not able to update the system or patch because the application that's running does not support, then do layering so that we have multiple layers before the hacker actually reach that system.
Right.
Monitor system usage and limit access to the building system computer and avoid non-functional activities, like internet browsing or checking personal emails on the system that runs the critical application. Few tips that staff can practice. Limit the number of privileged account on the system. Practice role-based access. Review all the system's account. And we have often seen when people leave the organization, the account stays. So disable any account that cannot be associated with the business process and most important, implement a backup and a recovery process. So that not only in case of cyber attack, but if system crashes, at least you can recover the system quickly in the event of crash or virus infection or a cyber attack. Plus, I know property management team, they are very focused on building operations and making sure tenants are happy, building operations are running smoothly. But with connected systems and technology in place, it's important to educate facility staff. They are the weakest link in the security. So if you train your staff, they serve as a good defense mechanism. And create policies for facility team, like access control policy, password change policy, backup policy, the same way we have policies in IT.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really important how you, kind of just touched on there. It's everybody's responsibility, I think, to be, aware of cybersecurity and potential risks of, cybersecurity attacks. To really kind of put that into or paint a picture of the, I suppose, the severity of that. Can you talk a little bit about, kind of maybe some of the financial risks that some of these large organizations face with a cybersecurity attack? For example, how costly could this be in very dramatic scenarios? I imagine there's different requirements for organizations, like banks, and for large, like large real estate companies and property management. So yeah, maybe just talk to me a little bit about, kind of some of those financial risks that some of these organizations face by not being diligent with cybersecurity as they should be.
Yeah. And it's different in case of smart building. And answer how big the issue is, I will share some reasons why hackers break into smart building. First, we see financial gain. Hackers look for back to corporate network via buildings. In some of the cases, there's a separate IT and a OT net, but we have seen in some of the buildings where IT and OT network are merging. So hackers actually look for a path to the corporate network via buildings to gain access to private financial files, information. So if the building network is connected with your corporate net, that's a dream come true for.
Mhm.
The second thing that we see is access to data. If they are monitoring the activity within the building through sensors, cameras, they can send the snapshot of this information via any messaging channel or any other mechanism. And in some of the cases, even sharing PII information. The other thing that we see is maybe to gain unauthorized access to the building. Because once the attackers have access to information like how your air conditioning works, they could make a phone call pretending to be someone from a maintenance company and say they are going to send a technician because they have noticed the fan is running at a maximum capacity. And they'll be able to gain unauthorized access to the building. So, and also disrupt building operations and cause brand damage. Because if they are able to gain access to HVAC or elevators, they'll be able to compromise the stable environment. And it might not be immediate effect in case of building. I mean, there could be like, if they make the temperature too high or too low, but in buildings like data center or research lab, any change in the temperature can lead to wiping off the data, or having the changing the temperature could lead to this failing of different equipments or even medicines and may impact the research activity. But the consequences of cyber attack, in some of the cases cannot be measured financially, because it could be safety of people or occupants by changing the temperature. It could lead to different health issues, reputational loss if the data is breached or the service is not delivered due to system failure. Also, trust of tenants and occupants. Liability of data, and especially in case of residential building where they have, PII information. They have information about the tenants. So any breach can cause misuse of that information. Legal action, associated cost, and breach resolution cost, or cost that is incurred if you need to incorporate some system backups or vendor cost, any physical damage to the property. So the list is endless. So we see not only financial, but also a safety to the occupants and reputational damage.
Understood. Yeah, those are some good points that I think you bring up, is the fact that, yeah, that you can't even really measure the impact of how this could be, because it kind of trickles into so many different areas of a business. So I mean, actually coming back now to the vendors, and you said that it was really the responsibility, or at least a good portion of the responsibility of the vendors to provide kind of secure and safe technology in environments. Can you talk about what are some of the different protocols or different networks and things like that you see really effective, coming from the telecom background yourself? Yeah. What are some of the ways that, now that everything is on the cloud and we're doing much less of things that are kind of on-prem? Can you talk to me a little bit about, the networking and connecting things to the cloud infrastructure, side of things that you see are really, really beneficial in the near future?
There are a huge number of wireless technologies that are currently available. Now, which one to go with depends on the deployment and requirement. Like Are there indoor or versus outdoor considerations? How long must the device battery last? Availability of the device. Like, is it okay if device shut down due to failure of local power? Or you want device to store the data throughput, latency? Like, there are so many factors. Now, coming to technologies available, BLE is a good choice when it comes to low power and close range communication between devices. If we talk about cellular is a good choice when time is essential, but device power is not a consideration. Also, physical deployment location is unpredictable, like when we deploy these kiosks in the building. But LoRaWAN, we see it's a good choice when your product is a battery operated product and it needs to send relatively low amount of data over a long distance. The benefit of LoRa that we see, it provides not only deep indoor coverage like basements and, elevator shafts, locations where it's difficult to put different other network, geolocation, and it offers end-to-end security because that's inbuilt.
And understood. And I think that is important, understanding that the type of technology and the type of data that you're producing, and then designing your technology to fit the use case around that. I think that's what a lot of companies right now are trying to do, and trying to determine the best ways for that to be applicable. And, what we've seen actually in the industry is a good mixture of, there's some property management organizations that have kind of adopted their own protocols and are asking vendors to kind of work with that protocol. And there's others that allow the vendors to be more independent and to work with one another. So maybe talk to me a little bit now that we're bringing a lot more vendors into the picture. So, like you said, we have our desk utilization, we have our occupancy, we have our indoor air quality, we have, even our HVAC systems and leak detection, and of course, smart sensor. What are kind of the cybersecurity concerns when you have all of these different vendors working amongst one another, but at the same time actually living in a silo, in that they're each kind of working as a vertical within the wider building kind of network that we're working on. So looking at a building and kind of like a horizontal web, and then all of these different vendors living in verticals. What are some of the cybersecurity concerns when you kind of consider the way that technology is being adopted by these buildings?
I think it's very important to understand which device needs to be connected and how these communication protocol works. And also when we are moving towards connected buildings, it's also important to understand how these communication protocol allows systems from different manufacturers to work together. Assess how to get started and identify a trusted partner that lead you through this process. It's very important to understand the operational environment. What's there in the building? Assets. What are the risks and vulnerabilities in those assets? And then plan to mitigate them to move the building in a green zone.
Right. Understood. Yeah. I think that's really, really helpful. And I suppose, what do you see organizations adopting as, I guess, that first must have technology right now? If you had to choose one, what would be, you think, as a property organization, what is that must have smart building technology that you're seeing being adopted right now based on the current trends?
It depends on the use case and also how ready the building is. But one of the things that I am commonly seeing these days is the adoption of occupancy and adoption of, automated cleaning solutions, where you get insights how the building is getting used. And based on that, you automate the cleaning to
Right.
reduce tenant complaints and to have better tenant retention.
Right. Right.
Also, it directly or indirectly impacts your insurance as well. Because if there is any fall incident in the building, so you can say, okay, there was a fall at this time, but this might have happened due to other causes because we did the cleaning like 5 minutes back.
Yeah, that's an interesting insight. I think the part that I would like to really think about there is, just because we adopt a technology for one use case doesn't mean it doesn't have applicability for many other use cases. And I think that as an organization, property and real estate is becoming more well versed in this data utilization and understanding, how they can apply data in multiple different ways across their organization. So, yeah, maybe share with me a little bit about how you're seeing organizations adapt and evolve when it comes to their ability to utilize data and really make use of this data. Because I think that's the future, like you said at the beginning of our conversation. It really comes down to, all these different sources of data and how we make the most use of them. So to talk to me a little bit about how properly managed organizations are, shifting and evolving their ability to utilize that.
Yes, like data is the power. You get so much of data from sensors, but then how to utilize it? When we think of smart cleaning solution, I'll give you that example. We focus, okay, we are automating our cleaning cycle, so that the building or the area that's less occupied, we have less cleaning cycle, and the area that's more occupied will have more cleaning cycle. So that we have less complaints and happy tenants. Second thing, you can use this data to understand the occupancy in a certain space because you're automating the cleaning cycle based on understanding how many people are in that space or how many people used that space, be it a washroom or lobby or a specific zone or a meeting room. So you can combine this cleaning solution with different other solutions in a building to say, okay, we on this day we have this many people in this area or this many people visited this area during this time to automate or to change the configuration in HVAC, have optimized lighting solution. Second thing, you can also keep a check on the consumable based on this data, and that impacts the sustainability side of it. And then we already talked about the insurance side of it. So when you combine data from one system to other system, right now they are siloed, but when you combine, there are n number of use cases that you can put together and that can help property manager, to generate insights and have operational efficiency in the building.
Yeah, and I think speaking from experience, one of the most exciting things that we work on at Mero is obviously not only the cleaning side, but collaborating with other vendors to create a solution that, like you said, is you could say N plus one. Where we're talking about something greater than the sum of its parts. And I think that's the really exciting part that we personally see is just the future here is really just starting when it comes to technology and expanding use cases. And when we can collaborate with other, products, integrate with one another and really try to create sort of like that smart building network, that really is what we see as is the future of IoT building. So yeah, kind of to lead into my question, what do you see as sort of your vision of the future of IoT in buildings? And, how can we get there as an industry?
I'll talk about from the cybersecurity side because we know use cases we can put together technology. But while real estate industry continues to grow, cybersecurity will continue to be a primary consideration. So it's really important when you put a solution, establish those best practice guidelines for IoT device implementation. So it's also important to consider physical and network security when planning so that you have a comprehensive security. Also create an incident response plan for a sound security posture. Even when you have operational security measures that are robust, you must have a plan to identify risk, respond to them, and mitigate any potential damages. Now, when we are talking about connected solutions, interoperability, and like you said, cybersecurity is everyone's responsibility, from building occupants to facility managers. So have a comprehensive cybersecurity approach that includes both technical and non-technical measures.
Yeah, I think that's a great sort of picture of the future. Like you said, as the real estate industry and as the smart building products really grow, so does the cybersecurity part. And I think that's a really kind of interesting thing as we start to wrap up to think about is that there are many industries, and so cybersecurity being one of them, that only has the opportunity potential to expand more. And it's like insurance, right? To use the analogy, it's like, you never, you have to have it. You never really want to use it.
Yeah.
wouldn't want to have to, really, go through that. But when you do, you're very grateful that, you invested in it and that you in place, because that's kind of how I see cybersecurity is it's going to be like insurance for our building networks and for our IT system. It's going to create a way for us to have that sort of fallback and that safety net. And I think, even if it's not quite there now, or, if it's starting to develop, it will be there very soon in the sense that, it's a must have. Everybody needs to be kind of protected and defended. And, it evolves from, the early days of when I was growing up, installing very, very basic antivirus in computers. And it's gone and expanded a lot more beyond that now, where, it's, a big portion of, the devices that we purchase is about privacy and security, and the different softwares that we purchase, they're about privacy and security, and as well as, like you mentioned, some of the certifications. So I think that's a really strong trend. And I think, experts like yourself in the cybersecurity world would absolutely, are absolutely going to see that kind of adoption take place. And so that's very, very exciting. Um, yeah, and so just to wrap up here, I have one last question. What is the sort of, if you have any contrarian viewpoints or any, call them, things that you think are taken for granted in this industry? Is there anything that you'd like to share? And then any other kind of final notes or closing thoughts before we wrap up here?
I would say cybersecurity. It has changed. It has changed a lot. But back then, like 3 years back when we started, we used to hear this sentence very commonly. No one would be interested in hacking us. We are not a bank. We have nothing a hacker would want. It has changed a lot, but still we hear from some of the owners and property management companies that our building is not in downtown. We have nothing a hacker would want. So it needs to be changed, because when we talk about cybersecurity or when we talk about security, we consider physical security, protecting tenants, controlling building access. But with technology and the increase in use of IoT devices and sensors, protecting building systems and occupants from cyber threat should be on the agenda.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree more, Harsha. And I think that's a great way for us to wrap up. So I thank you again very much for your time and sharing some of your, best practices and learnings from the cybersecurity space and the smart building world. And, we really look forward to kind of continuing this conversation as we mentioned, as this becomes something that, becomes commonplace everywhere. So thank you again very much for your time. And until next time, see you later.
Thank you, Nathan.
Thanks, Harsha.